breaking news. And I don't use that phrase lightly. I mean, the kind of news that rewrites military doctrine while the ink is still drying.
Yeah.
We are getting reports coming in right now, today, Wednesday, January 28th, 2026, that Ukraine has, well, effectively wiped out another $1 billion worth of Russian airfields and equipment.
In a single day.
Yeah.
It's just absolute chaos on the monitoring channels.
And to be clear, this isn't some stray drone hitting a fuel depot. This isn't a lucky shot.
No, not at all. What we're watching here is a systematic, calculated dismantling of a superpower's ability to wage war from the air. The scale is, well, it's unprecedented.
Before we get into the smoke and the fire and just the sheer impossibility of how they pulled this off, if you are supporting the defense of Ukraine and you want the truth that cuts through the fog of war, you know what to do.
Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports.
I'm Alex. Join me with Aria in the latest podcast by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going to cover Operation Spiderweb and the massive campaign that has followed it right up to this morning.
This is the story of how Ukraine infiltrated deep, and I mean deep into Russia, to destroy the nuclear triad's air component from the inside out.
We are talking literal Mission Impossible stuff here. I'm seeing reports of drones smuggled in crates labeled as, boring machine parts.
Launchers hidden inside wooden cabins on commercial trucks.
And the wildest part, unwitting Russian civilian drivers delivering the weapons of their own destruction.
And we can't forget the tech, the OSA drones. This is AI that learned to kill modern bombers by staring at museum pieces.
Exactly. The goal of this deep dive is to unpack exactly how a smaller force is dismantling a superpower strategic aviation using, sheer ingenuity, $2,000 drones, and nerves of steel.
So, looking at the news today, the scale is massive.
It is. But to understand what's happening now, in January 2026, we actually have to rewind the clock a bit, don't we?
We do. We have to go back to where the cracks in the dam really started. To understand today's billion-dollar loss, we have to look at the operation that truly changed the game. Operation Spiderweb, executed back on June 1st, 2025.
Right. And just to set the stage for you listening, this wasn't some missile strike launched from Kiev. This wasn't something just flying over the border.
No, this was a covert intelligence operation. The SBU Ukraine's security service, they spent something like 18 months planning this.
18 months?
They realized they couldn't just launch weapons at Russia, not with those distances. They had to move an entire infrastructure behind enemy lines.
So they're operating on hostile soil. I mean, that is incredibly risky.
Deeply hostile. They leased a warehouse in Chelyabinsk.
Chelyabinsk, wait, let's just picture a map here. That's way east of the Urals. That's deep central Russia.
It is thousands of kilometers from the front lines. Exactly. It's supposed to be the safest place on earth for the Russian military. They rented a warehouse, specifically at 28A Sverdlovsky Tract. And the rent, about 350,000 rubles a month. It was just a standard commercial lease.
I love the banality of that. They're planning this historic military strike, but first, they have to sign a lease and pay a deposit.
It's the boredom of bureaucracy that hides you. So into this warehouse, they smuggled roughly 150 drones and about 300 explosive payloads.
How do you even get that much hardware across a border during a full-scale war? You can't exactly put high explosives on the customs form.
You label them machine parts or industrial components. It was all palletized cargo smuggled across the Belarusian and Kursk borders. And this is the key insight for anyone listening. Logistics systems are overwhelmed in wartime.
Right.
Nobody checks the paperwork on, industrial components closely enough when there are thousands of tons of cargo moving every single day. If the paperwork looks boring, it passes.
So the weapons are in place. They're in the warehouse in Chelyabinsk. But, okay, having them in a warehouse is one thing. Getting them to the airfields without being seen is another. This is the part that it reads like a spy novel.
It really does. They built these custom wooden modular cabins.
Okay.
To the naked eye, they just look like mobile homes or maybe those prefab construction site offices you see. Totally innocuous. You wouldn't look twice at them on the highway. But the roofs were mechanical.
A Trojan horse.
A literal Trojan horse on wheels. They loaded these cabins onto standard commercial semi-trailers. And then, and this is the part that just blows my mind, the SBU didn't use their own drivers.
Wait, what do you mean? They didn't have agents driving the trucks?
No, that's way too much risk of exposure.
Yeah.
They used gray market logistics apps. Think of it like a Russian Uber for freight.
So they hired freelancers.
Exactly. They posted a load, and a regular Russian truck driver would pick it up. They hired completely random Russian civilians.
So you have a Russian civilian sitting in his cab, maybe eating a sandwich, listening to the radio, totally unaware that in the back is a swarm of killer drones.
Precisely. These drivers thought they were just hauling construction materials. They were given specific instructions. Park at this rest stop or this lay-by, usually just a few kilometers from major air bases like Belaya, Olenja, or Diaghilevo.
It's incredible. So then what happens? The driver's asleep in the cab.
At the critical moment, SBU operators, who were likely miles away or had already exfiltrated, remotely triggered the sequence. The cabin roofs just slide open. I mean, can you imagine the terror? Suddenly, a swarm of drones launches from your trailer.
What about the drivers?
They likely fled in a panic. But here's the cleanup. After the launch, the trucks self-destructed.
To destroy the evidence.
And the launch platforms, clean. By the time the Russian FSB arrived, all they found were burning trucks and these very confused drivers who knew absolutely nothing.
It's terrifyingly brilliant. But I want to pivot to the economics of this, because we always talk about asymmetric warfare, but this is extreme. We're seeing billion-dollar losses for Russia. What's it costing Ukraine to inflict that?
Peanuts. I mean, relatively speaking, the weapon of choice here is the Ukrainian-made Osa quadcopter.
Osa, that means WASP, right?
It does. And the cost per unit?
Yeah.
About $2,000.
$2,000. I know people with mountain bikes that cost more than that. I think my laptop costs more.
And they strapped about 3.2 kilograms of high explosives to them. They threw these $2,000 WASPs against 295 MS strategic bombers.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, these bombers, they aren't just expensive, they're irreplaceable, aren't they?
Correct. They're worth hundreds of millions on paper, but in reality, they're priceless because Russia literally cannot build them anymore. The production lines closed decades ago. You lose one, it is gone forever.
You can't just spin up a factory and make a new Bear bomber.
Not a chance.
Now, Russia isn't defenseless. We've all seen those satellite photos. Where they put car tires on the wings of their bombers to confuse sensors. It looked ridiculous, like a scrapyard on a plane. But did it work?
It did not. And here's why. The SBU expected that. They knew Russia would try to break the visual signature of the planes, so they trained their AI targeting systems on archival data. But even more fascinatingly, they trained it on museum pieces.
Museum pieces? You're kidding. That's almost poetic.
It is. There's a Poltava Museum of Long-Range and Strategic Aviation right there in Ukraine. They have old Tu-22 M3s just sitting on the tarmac.
Wow.
So the Ukrainian engineers spent months training the AI to recognize the silhouette of the aircraft from every single angle. Regardless of camouflage or tires or sandbags, it learned what a backfire bomber looks like in the real world, not just on a schematic.
So the AI just ignores the tires and sees the fuel tank underneath.
Exactly. And the drones didn't just hit the fuselage randomly. They were programmed to target the wing routes where the fuel tanks are located and the pylon routes where the missiles attach. Maximum fire, maximum destruction.
I have a question about control, though. If the operators are back in Kiev or even just exfiltrated, and the drone is deep in Siberia, how are they controlling it? Jamming is a huge issue in this war.
They used the enemy's own infrastructure against them. They routed control signals through Russian civilian mobile networks 4G and LTE.
So they used Russian cell towers to guide their own attack drones.
They did. And for the terminal guidance, that final dive, it was fully autonomous. So even if Russian electronic warfare jammed the signal at the last second, the AI just took over. It recognized the target from that museum training data and went in for the kill shot on its own.
It's the ultimate asymmetry. But I want to talk about the targets themselves, because when we say airfields, I think a lot of people picture a runway near the front line, maybe near Donbass. That's not what we're talking about here.
No, not at all. This operation effectively erased Russia's whole concept of strategic depth. Take Belaya Air Base. That's in Siberia. It's 4,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border.
4,500 kilometers. Just for context, that's roughly the distance from London to Baghdad.
Or New York to Los Angeles. It's supposed to be the ultimate safe haven. It's where you put the assets you can never, ever afford to lose.
And they lost them.
They did. Maxar satellite imagery confirmed 7 bombers destroyed there during Spiderweb. 3 Tu-95 MS Bears and 4 Tu-22 M3 backfires. Some were reduced to, literal piles of ash.
And what about Olenja?
That's up in the Arctic Circle, 1,800 kilometers away. It's a crucial launch point for their nuclear-capable missiles. They lost 4 Tu-95s and an An-12 transport plane there.
Can we just pause on what these planes actually do? Why does losing a Tu-95 matter so much to the average person in Kyiv or Kharkiv?
The Tu-95 Bear. It's the backbone. It's this massive turboprop bomber that launches the cruise missiles that hit Ukrainian cities, power plants, apartment buildings. So if you lose the Bear, you lose the ability to launch those mass volleys of missiles.
And the A-50, I heard they got hit too.
The mainstay. Those are the airborne early warning planes, the big radar dishes in the sky. They're like the quarterback for the Air Force. They cost between $300 and $500 million each. 2 were hit at Ivanovo.
Those are incredibly rare assets.
Incredibly. Losing 2 is like losing your eyes in the sky. It's a devastating blow.
So the SBU estimates from Operation Spiderweb alone were around $7 billion in damages. They claim 34% of the strategic cruise missile fleet was hit. That is a staggering number for an operation that probably costs less than a luxury apartment in Moscow.
It shifted the leverage completely.
Yeah.
And the reaction inside Russia, well, it reflected that.
I can imagine. I saw Pearl Harbor comparisons flying around on social media.
Russian media was hysterical. The panic on Telegram was palpable. You had military bloggers just screaming at the FSB for, and this is a quote, catching drunks, while their strategic airfields burned to the ground.
It's a terrible look for their security services.
It's catastrophic. They started panic building bunkers at bases like Kalino and Saki. But it was far too little, too late. The psychological impact was just as bad as the physical one.
But operationally, they have a huge problem now. They can't just leave the surviving planes sitting there in Siberia if Siberia isn't safe anymore.
No. And this brings us to what analysts are now calling the 23-hour sortie.
The 23-hour sortie. Okay.
Because they don't feel safe in Siberia? Russia has been forced to disperse its remaining fleet to the extreme Far East bases, like Anadyr and Yelezovo.
That sounds very far.
It's practically the other side of the planet. So to fly a mission to strike Ukraine now, a Tu-95 has to fly for 23 hours, round trip.
That sounds exhausting for the pilots, but what does it do to the planes?
It is brutal on the airframe. It requires massive amounts of aerial refueling, which is a logistical nightmare. But worse, it just burns up engine life. These engines are old. You can't just order a replacement NK-12 engine on Amazon, you know?
So this is what you call secondary attrition.
Exactly. Even if the drone doesn't kill the bomber, the commute might. They are wearing out the planes just to get them to the fight. Every hour flown is an hour closer to that airframe being unflyable forever. The SBU has forced Russia to grind its own air force into dust.
And this initial Operation Spiderweb happened right before the Istanbul peace talks, didn't it?
It did. It showed that Ukraine could strike anywhere, anytime. It completely changed the diplomatic leverage. It proved that Russia is vulnerable everywhere.
Which brings us to today, Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. We started the show with the breaking news that the SBU Alpha unit has struck again.
The Alpha unit hasn't stopped since Spiderweb. We're looking at another $1 billion in losses confirmed just today. The total impact from this one unit over the course of the war, it's now estimated to be over $5 billion.
And it's not just the deep rear, right? We're seeing more action in Crimea, too.
Correct. Just recently, in December 2025, there was a huge strike at Belbek Airfield in occupied Crimea. 2 Su-27 fighter jets were hit.
And those aren't cheap either.
No. One was fully loaded for combat, sitting on the tarmac, missiles on the rails, and it was just vaporized. That's a $70 million loss right there. Plus, the control tower was damaged.
So it complicates everything. They can't organize flights. They can't coordinate defense.
It's a systematic blinding of the Russian aerospace forces.
We have to acknowledge the other side of this, though. Russia isn't just taking this lying down.
No, and we have to be realistic about that. The retaliation has been absolutely brutal. Russia launched a wave of over 400 drones and missiles recently. This is a high-intensity escalation.
But there's a difference in the targeting, isn't there?
A huge difference. Ukraine is striking military capability. The launchers, the bombers, the radar, they're removing the tools of war. Russia is largely just lashing out in retaliation and often against civilian infrastructure.
It really highlights the difference in strategy. One is trying to disable the opponent's sword. The other is just trying to smash the shield.
That's a very good way to put it.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at the big picture, what we have is a decentralized, clever operation using commercial tech to effectively dismantle the untouchable nuclear triad's air wing.
The so what here is that strategic depth is dead. That whole concept that if you're a big enough country, you can hide your important assets far away from the front, that's over.
Distance doesn't offer safety anymore.
Not at all. It's the death of the safe rear area. A handful of cheap drones smuggled in a commercial truck using an app can neutralize a superpower's most expensive assets. The Russian VKS, their aerospace forces, have been permanently degraded. They cannot build new Tu-95s to replace the ones burning on the tarmac in Siberia.
Yeah.
That capability is gone forever.
It's a David versus Goliath victory, but David has a remote control, a 4G connection, and an Uber account.
And significantly better intelligence.
Here's a final thought for you to chew on, and it's a bit provocative. If commercial trucks and $2,000 drones can disable a nuclear superpower's strategic bombers, what does this mean for the security of any nation's military bases anywhere in the world?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? If Russia can't protect its nuclear bombers in the middle of Siberia, who is truly safe?
The era of safe rear areas is officially over.
It certainly seems that way.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry.
Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.